you are positively advantaged being black now, and this is just a fact. Whether you want to be black, applying to the best medical schools in the country, or to try to get a job at Netflix, or to get a job with the Ford
I don't
Foundation.
believe that, Sam, because the numbers just don't bear that out.
So that's an interesting start already.
Right. That is a very
We
interesting
got
start.
Sam Harris and Don Lemon here. I know Sam is somebody, at least historically, we both respect a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that intro?
I feel like Sam is Sam is losing me. Now, as it relates to the video, I will give Sam his props. Like, I don't think that it's not oftentimes, just like you said, historically we both love Sam Harris, and I don't disagree with him a lot, but the issues that I'm starting to disagree with him on, it's starting to become more clear that either he is
You think he's biased?
either biased, or he's claiming to be ignorant, or he's generally dismissing context. And that's where it's just like, as it relates to this situation in particular, like being advantaged in America, there is no way that you can tell me a Jamal applying for a job is going to be positively advantaged relative to a Tyler or
So let me play devil's advocate here in defense of Sam. There could be, so like the meaning of the words he's trying to use here. Perhaps he's saying he's not wrong that there are advantages to being black. Now, are we saying that we're net advantaged over
right.
white people, like overall? Then that's a different conversation than saying, are there some advantages in some contexts to being black in America? So something like affirmative action is an
Right.
advantage, and that
Right.
does exist. Just like
Right.
the examples he said, if you are a qualified black, say, AI researcher, and they want to have more diverse people on their AI research teams, and almost everybody's a Indian or Asian or white person or something like that, then like there certainly is true that there are instances where it's better to be black than not be black. So like if that's his only point, that there's, when he says advantage, that there are some cases where you are advantaged, then he's right about that. But then if you talk about net advantage, as if it's generally better to be black than to be white, then that's a lot harder to defend.
You're right, and I think you hit it spot on. But I think, like, to me, Sam is he's being a prisoner of the moment, and to where he's like, and as of this moment, you have policies like affirmative action and DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and as a Black American citizen, you are positively advantaged. And I'm like, that is, I understand the context of what you're saying, but let's look at history, and let's look at the systemic disadvantages of being African American in the United States, and how that has had effects in terms of the wealth disparity between races, and how that continues to have an effect in terms of socioeconomic factors. And maybe the only equitable way to address that is to have policies like DEI or things of that nature, so, or in affirmative action, so Black people can actually participate. Otherwise, you have created a system. You already had a systemic system where they were 3/5 of the law. They were slaves. They represented a labor economy in the United States. Like, and now you got the civil rights, Jim Crow, all of that Reconstruction, and now you're saying that after all of this systemic disadvantages, the moment that they're trying to play catch up, this is where like, now we're the privileged. Like, I have a problem with that, and I think he's ignoring. That's where I say I think he's either ignoring context, or he's deliberately uh, doing it, and I think I would have an issue with that.
So I wouldn't assume the negative intent. Like I certainly don't think Sam is a racist or anything like that. I think that, if again, you're right if you're talking about history, right? Tons of things happen to us historically that had still have big impacts today, just through, cause and effect of, this happened and that happened, et cetera. So certainly the effects of slavery, Jim Crow, and then many other things, redlining and bank loans and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, there's certainly disadvantages, since black folks have been here, that made it a lot harder for black folks to get ahead, and that's not even arguable.
Right.
So you can't argue against that. But if he is just talking about specifically, and here's another thing too, and this may be a little more controversial, especially challenging my black card here, but like even speaking like black people are a thing, like it's even a choice to even identify as black, right? So for instance, let's say you have a and you could argue that Africans aren't black, right? So let's say you have an African who came here, or let's say you have an African that came to the United States after slavery ended. So let's say it was 1900 or something like that. But like, and then their descendants today, they look like black people. They look indistinguishable, but they were never impacted by slavery. Now they still would have been impacted by Jim Crow and other things. But
Right.
anyway, my point is like they may not have had like the slavery impact, but they still get the benefit of like affirmative action because their skin is dark or whatever. It's like even choose to like identify with that is a bit of a choice. And if you think purely on an individual level, right? If you toss out that group mentality of belonging to the black race or the white race, whatever, you just toss that out and say, hey, because of my skin color, I'm more likely to get this job. If you're solely focusing on that, then Sam's not wrong about that limited focus. And that's where you may say, okay, he's dismissing the context and choosing to only focus on that limited context
Right.
potentially.
Right. That's exactly right. I think he's only choosing to focus on that limited context, and then I'm making judgments based on that because, like, to me, a well informed person would understand historical context.
But yeah, you were saying that he should have, even if he chose to have a narrower context, maybe he should have had the judgment not to speak on that very narrow context.
And not necessarily the judgment not to speak on it, but to at least give reference to the historical context. So at least you're providing proper context so you're not coming off as intentionally disregarding that, or as someone would call it, racist. It's just like if you're not going to provide that context and then you're going to hold that position without providing any context, you're
Well,
going.
I don't think it's racist to say that black people are advantaged by DEI programs.
And I'm not calling him racist, and I don't think that Sam is racist, but I'm choosing to focus on that issue without proper context. It gives
Like
me.
he should handle it better. That's what you want him to handle this better,
Not
basically.
only do I want him to handle it better, I want to focus on why he believes it's to be an issue. And it's just like because relative to other issues, especially understanding the context, I think, and I believe Don Lemon may even ask him the question, well, how do you address that? Like, how do you address the historical systematic disadvantages? And then I believe like he gave a pretty weak answer, if not deflected. And then it's just like, if you're not, number one, going to provide an alternative to what already existed, and then two, you're going to say that people who have historically been disadvantaged when they're on their way to getting equality, that they're now being privileged, especially when they're still far, far, far behind the races as it relates to education, as it relates to getting a job at Netflix and having income, as it relates to having housing. It's just like if the system isn't already building in those guardrails, because systematically we were already disadvantaged and those rails were there to stop us. If we're not building any guardrails, then what are we doing, and why are you focusing on that? And if you're focusing on that without providing context, I'm just like, I got an issue. And it's just like that's
I
what.
mean, to be fair, I don't know the context because this is like a preview of like what comes up. So I don't know the context of what he, in which he even brought this up. Like what made him start talking about this. I guess we'll see that later. Though I don't expect we'll have time to get through this whole video. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel like he's talking about not all black people, but he said the black people who are highly skilled and, at the collegiate level and at the level of these companies where they want to have black folks on their boards and all that. Like for those people, there is an advantage, and he's not wrong about that. I can't say he's not wrong about that, but you could just say that's a limited thing to be talking about that, may make some people feel like he's dismissive of what you're talking about, that history.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. It's just like if I'm being honest as it relates to affirmative action and DEI, he's not wrong, but I believe those to be necessary tools to address disparities that haven't been addressed. And it's just like I think if we're not going to do so from a a perspective of like law, then maybe the market is trying to do something like that, where people say a lot of these issues should be fixed by the market. The market is doing things of that nature, and like there are some laws that are in place, but like to me, that is a reasonable program or structure to help support disadvantaged people. And I take issue to why someone would.
Well, the thing is Sam even criticizing it though? He's just saying that it's there, that it is an advantage. I didn't hear him say that there shouldn't be those programs. He just said that there is an advantage.
No, yeah, he's gonna criticize it. Because
Okay.
he's gonna say that it comes, and he's right. He's right to say he's gonna say that it comes uh, at the expense. He's gonna say disproportionately affects Asian students who are applying to college. Like where it's just like if Asian student has the same SAT score as a black kid, the institution is going to take the black student just based on race alone to have that diversity. And it's like I can understand what you're saying, but it's
Yeah,
just
but
like,
I don't think schools have to only prioritize test scores. It's just
right,
like the best educational experience is when everyone has the best test scores. It's like, well, maybe there is some value in having different types of people at your school. Now, how much value should that be is a reasonable question, right? Should
right,
you accept black folks and not just black folks, any kind of different experience, right? Whether it's a disability or, and not, I don't like saying that because it sounds like that black is a disability. But anyway, my point is like anyone with any sort of different experience, like there's some value into having a diverse base of students, and not everybody, your whole university, Harvard isn't just everybody that came from the same elite rich high schools that just straight up goes to Harvard, right?
right,
So I think there's some, there's value in universities being able to value, and they already do, right? Extracurriculars and all that, and just maybe a different life perspective. I think that there's people assume that it always has to be only the test scores to have a good educational experience, and education is something, especially in my experience, I've seen a lot from my personal life, from low income black schools and elementary and middle where we met, fortunately, and
yep,
on to kind of middle class white places in high school, and then different higher education. Like I've seen many different, I've been in many different rooms with different people, and that adds to my experience. And I think trying to provide that at your university is not a bad thing. It's not wrong to consider things other than raw test scores. And again, we already accept that implicitly with stuff like extracurriculars.
right.
But then the reasonable question is, well, how different can it be, right? How low can you score and still get in, and then not be, too far. And different people are going to draw that line in different places. Some people may say there should be no line at all. It should be equivalent. Is it, 30 points? Is it 100 points? Whatever. Different people have different opinions on that. But I think that too many people assume that it only has to be test scores or it's unfair.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think like to me, Sam is what he's fighting for, or the point that he's trying to make isn't wrong. That's what I'm saying. Like if you're saying that you want equity amongst all races and you're aiming for something like a meritocracy, then I understand. But provide context, and not only like in that statement provide context, but like to me, equity in a system to where people were systematically disadvantaged is to provide a way for them to get to an equitable situation, and you only get there through programs like this. And to me, like
Well,
that,
the only thing I'll say is I said this a little bit before, but like this assumes that you think in terms of groups. that you identify as a black man or an Asian man or a woman or whatever you are. If you think in terms of groups, then group disadvantages come into play. But if you think as an individual, then what happened to other black people in
Never.
history or what happens to other black people today and what happens to me personally become less tied together. And then if you have that strong, like, and I think this might be like an enlightenment thing, right? Like strong, like individual values and individual rights and protect. If you think like an individual, then like what happened to black people generally is less of an issue as long as the black individual is treated with the same respect as every other individual. So you see what I'm saying? Like even
I,
thinking about black people as a group is a choice that someone has to make.
I get you, and it's to me, it's I understand, I understand, but like just like you said, it's not arguable that there were systematic disadvantages against a group of people in the United States. We can't.
Right.
There's absolutely no debate for that, and there's no debate that it has had systemic and socioeconomic factors that still affect these groups of people today. There's no
Right.
argument about that, and is if we're going to reasonably address that, to me as a moral agent, I believe that there is a moral imperative to address or atone for those actions, just like countries and states have done so previously in many different examples. And so it's just like if that is being done, then I'm okay as a moral agent personally for programs like that, so you can create equality or have some sense of that. But when you're stating these positions, especially when someone is trying to get to some sort of equilibrium, and you're fighting against that, where these people are already starting at the bottom, and now it's just like I have some sense of light. I have some sense of light because it's just like it's going to take for education, like most black people, as it relates to the wealth disparity, most black people, if 60% of Americans can't afford a $500 uh, e- emergency expense,
Black folks certainly ain't.
how many African Americans do you think can afford an education? Like, you know what I mean? Can reasonably afford to pay for an education on their own, or can have a good example of what the system should be to then go out and to have a job or to get a set of skills. It's just like, and I understand, just like you said earlier, like investing in programs like that is good, and that's one way of doing it. Like you could assure the bottom for all people, but when you're on that road, when you're on that road to creating that positive scenario for the people who were disadvantaged, and someone comes in your way to block them, to say, you know what, black people are privileged in this sense, it's just like, what is your reason? And that's what is your why? That's
Well,
more.
I think the why could just be that he's an individualist enlightenment guy, and not to. I'm not saying we're biased, but we're two black folks, and he's not. So he may not have as much of a reason to care about that whole identity thing. He might just be like, look, I'm just going to stick to individualism and treat everybody the same, and let's just move forward on that. And that's not an anti-black thing. That's not a racist thing. That's just not really buying into the racial conversation at all. Just saying, hey, we're just individuals and let's colorblind it up. Which honestly, I think that's the best way to make policy, especially the best way to pass policy. For instance, just like you said, right? If a certain percentage of Americans can't afford $500, then a bigger percentage of Black Americans can't afford $500.
Absolutely.
So if we target programs to help the poor, then it'll disproportionately help Black people too, and that's something that's more palatable for your white voter, right? Where if you just say we're going to help Black folks, then you got resistance.
And I'm not against that. Like just like you said, I'm for assuring the bottom, and it's just like I in a general context, I understand his argument, and I think it's fair when you're talking about equality and you're assuming that everybody already at an equitable state. Like so, we're all at the racing line, and everybody has an equal start. If you're assuming that everybody has an equal start, then absolutely you're correct, Sam. And maybe this would be something that I would see as a moral obligation or something that is reasonable for you to put your neck out on to fight. But we're not starting at the same spot. Everybody is not starting at the same spot, especially disproportionately African Americans. And it's just like, in order to get us at the same starting point to even run this race, you gotta remove some chains that we have. Like, some people are just like, I've even seen videos about it where they were talking about race, and it's just like, and they were showing the systematic issues and the wealth, and it's just like how relative to other races, people are just running and going towards prosperity, and whether it's being able to get a job, and whether it's being able to reasonably afford an education without barriers to life. Like, it's just like there are a lot of barriers that African Americans have that, as it relates to life.
Yeah,
And
I remember, and sorry to cut you off here, but I remember watching. It was like, I think it was called Hard Earned or something like that. It was a series from, I don't remember. I don't even remember who ran the series, but basically it was just showing people's lives on the low end of society, just kind of living normal lives, getting by. And I remember there was a black family on the show, and they had a mother and a father at the home,
yep,
but it was, it was like, I think it was like three or four kids, and they had, the parents there, and I think like her grandma was there, and maybe somebody else. And the mom, she's doing her best. Like, she's doing her best. She's trying to get them to do their homework, but like, she's trying to do their homework. It's like, it's a small apartment. They all share the same room. They're trying to do their homework on like this one table
yep,
that's like filled with a bunch of junk. There's TVs on, people having conversations, playing around. I'm like, you trying to focus in this environment? Like, that's hard.
right.
And you don't think about that. You don't think that, you think, you just assume it's normal. Like, oh, he has his own room and his desk and it's quiet and he sits down and studies. Like, no, these girls got to study in a
And can't
real tough environment. You don't even know
right,
what they go through. It's like,
right.
how are you supposed to learn in that environment? But that's the type of stuff that we go through that people don't see.
Absolutely. And that, to me, that is a very good description of what you would call, like, the black experience. Is just like ghettos in America are the slums of America. Ghettos are uh, disproportionately African American populated. Like, that's what you have, unfortunately. And it's just like these are the conditions in which we exist, and it's because of like, literally because just like things of redlining, things of that nature, like systemic issues, like systemic fractures in the system, is what created the environment that we have today. And when you're on the road to try to address some of those issues, when a reasonable individual gets in your way, and there's like, and who you assume to be reasonable, it's just like, I'm like, I understand your argument, but now is not the time for that. It's just like the 40 years after the civil rights movement, and we still have some systemic issues. We still got some room to make, Sam. Like, everybody, I understand individualism, but we're not at that equitable start yet. And in order for us to even have that thought process of thinking of everybody as individuals, we need to address the systemic issues that we had, that we all know we can't argue. It's just like, and to me, if you're choosing to die on that mountain, I'm I'm questioning your why.
Yeah, I still got respect for Sam, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I do totally understand where you're coming from about like, why are we talking about it this way?
Right.
I can see where you're coming from there.
I want to give my overall thought process for Sam, because I want people to understand Sam is a reasonable guy. I do not believe he's a racist. I believe 90% of the time Sam is going to provide an unbiased take that is more likely than not to put you on a reasonable path. And I think there are two situations in particular where I've taken issue with what Sam has to say. It's this particular issue as it relates to DEI and affirmative action, and the Israel Hamas conflict, where I think he has some uh, interesting, again, it just lack of context. And I think if you're going to hold these positions, I'm like, and you're not going to provide context, I'm like, I'm going to judge you on why you're holding these positions and why you're not choosing to place value on the context. So I want to say Sam is a reasonable guy. I think he's certainly don't believe that he's a racist. I'm questioning his why, and I think I don't want to give anyone, and I hope no one gives me a hard pass for everything that I do just because of who I am in history. Judge me off of what I say, and that's exactly what I'm doing with Sam. Historically speaking, most things that I heard from Sam has been spot on, but he's starting to veer off, and I gotta let him know. At least I gotta put my perspective on it.
Yeah, you need that. You need people that are able to be honest with you when you start messing up. You know, if Kanye had some more had
Yeah,
his mom to talk to him, he might be doing a little better too.
absolutely, absolutely. Like,
Cool. Well, yeah, we can go ahead and wrap it up here. And until next time, we'll talk about something new. Maybe we can get into the Sam Harris Hamas situation. But I'm sure there's more to this interview because
oh,
we got
absolutely,
19 seconds through and have
absolutely.
30 minutes of conversation.
There's a lot in that 19 seconds though. When you say black people are privileged or you are positively advantaged as a black person in America, you better have. I mean,
Be
that's
ready.
yeah, that's a weighted sentence right there. That's a heavy, heavy, heavy sentence right there, and I don't think Sam came with an adequate response personally. But you may have something different to say once you hear the rest of it, and I think I'm pretty firm on my position, but I am interested in your perspective because I understand. And I do think you bring up an interesting point as it relates to like if you're being for individuals or individualism, then and that's generally speaking, that's the best route forward. That's going to do the most amount of good for everybody. But you got to have some context to what you're saying because the most amount of good wasn't happening for everybody in America. There was a group of people that was disadvantaged, and you still have those waves that are affecting us today. And without you talking about that and giving that some historical context, that sentence,
Because it's both. Like black people are still disadvantaged today, but there are some situations where we're advantaged too. Like it's both. It's not like we're always disadvantaged, or like my dad would say, he has privilege when he walks onto a basketball court.
I was just about to say, I was
There's
just
a
about to say,
situation where we got advantages, but there's
yep,
other
yep,
situations you walk in that interview, and
yep.
it may not be so good depending on where you're at. Now, again, if you're interviewing maybe somewhere in Silicon Valley or media, maybe it is better. But if you're interviewing in some southern small town, shop, then it may not be too good for you.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about no Tim Harris talking about a black person that's positively advantaged in the state of Louisiana going to go for a job in finance. It's just like you gonna have some barriers in New Orleans. It's just like and it depends on the cities. It's just like New Orleans is probably largely a African American city, but still, it's just like in the South, it's a perfect example. It's just like
Yeah,
you're as a black person, any black person in the
I
South.
still see Confederate flags sometimes.
I
I
was
get
just
nervous, man.
get in Ohio. Yeah, and I'm like, it's just like you gonna
Confederate
tell me.
flags and pickup trucks. You better watch out.
It's just like, and then that's the person that's interviewing me, and you telling me I'm walking in with a positive advantage. I'm like, I'm like, Sam, this is a hard fight, and this is where I'm like, you either got to provide some heavy context, or you got to provide an alternative solution. And I think, as I said before, I think he dodged that question when I heard it, and maybe I didn't fully give thought to what he was saying because maybe there could be bias. I am a black man, as you said, so I could be my black heart could just be showing itself, and I'm just like I want to defend us. But I think that if you're going to do so without context and without providing an alternative solution, which I don't think he did a good job when Don Lemon asked him that question, then I'm just like you're on you're playing on the side where a lot of people have negative intention, even though your intent could be positive, and to create some sort of equilibrium. You're on the side of a lot of people with bad intent, and without knowing your intent, it's just like you're creating some controversy.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I know you're with Sam, so it's just like I I'm 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 not sad because like I don't think it's a huge fall off for Sam, but there's some alarms. There are some alarms for Sam Harris, and I think it should be raised, especially as it relates to the Israel Hamas situation, too, more so even than this.
Yeah, I haven't seen Sam so far. I haven't seen too much negative. Like I said, everything he said today was technically right, even though, like you said, a lot of stuff left out. A lot of stuff could have been said with the background. Like I said, we are advantaged in some situations, we're disadvantaged in other situations. What's the net? I don't really know how to quantify that. But I can't say he was wrong necessarily on the Israel Hamas stuff. He is a Jew, and sorry, Sam, if there's some anti-Semites out there that didn't know. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to see. I haven't heard anything that makes me worried about Sam, maybe in the way that Elon Musk shifted. But we'll see. The more I hear, but I haven't heard anything yet that makes me too nervous.
Yeah, I mean, to me, any situation in which you have a potential, you or your group of people or any interest that you have could be positively affected, there should be a bias alarm. There should be a bias.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
And I think with Sam, as it relates to the Israel Hamas situation, there certainly should be a bias alert. And I don't think that, I think the alarm is going off, but I don't think he hears it.
Hit that snooze button.
Yeah, I think that's news. And I think normally Sam isn't. I think normally Sam is the center, but I think this situation has disproportionately affected him because like of course he has family members, of course he knows people in that region, of course he feels a part of that group. So it's just like there are a lot of sharp words that are coming from Sam in that context, and just switching on his positions like traditionally Sam was against religious states. He's like, I'm not a Zionist. He's like, of course, Sam being popular for being one of the four horsemen, for giving atheism to the world or making it more popular. It was already here, but making it more popular. He is going against that narrative. He's just like he has said verbatim, "Well, like count me a Zionist," and I'm like, you heading into some dangerous waters. Like this is like as an atheist, for you to be for a religious state, even when you have historically have said like I'm not for any religious states. It's just like, and that religious state happens to be a part of your genealogy. It's just like there should be a red flag.
I just thought a little funny joke. It's like, I wonder how Sam would feel if someone said Jews were positively advantaged.
Yeah, like, because there's a like, and to be honest, I feel that way, but I don't even not even necessarily feel scared to say it, but it's just like I feel like it's taboo to even talk about anti-Semitism, and just like to say like in this context, I feel like anti-Semitism, like if you say something that is uh, just criticize, just like general criticism, whether it is with fact or not. Like if you're stating that the ICC has stated that this is legally a genocide that's going on, or if you're stating things of that nature, like
So you're basically saying like people are like equating critiques of Israel with anti-Semitism.
yeah, and it's hard. Like it's at that.
Well, what I would say to me, it's just like what you said, where you say, "Well, the people, things you're saying, other people kind of agree with," and you got to be nervous about like who's on the side that you're saying. I think it's the same because like people will criticize Israel for anti-Semitic reasons, 100%, right?
Right,
But then when you criticize them for a non-anti-Semitic reason, then they're like, "Well, wait, are you one of those people?"
right,
And
right.
that's similar to the point you were just making, though.
You're right. You're right. But I think I think right now,
Like
and
if a Jewish person, gets a math problem wrong and you say it's wrong, it's anti-Semitism. Like, what
yeah, it's just like I
the?
think that word is starting to take on a very broad definition,
Well,
and
they're sensitive people, and for good reason,
well,
right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely for good reason,
they're
absolutely.
very sensitive.
But it's just like you still are not beyond criticism, especially if you're the way that you're
In
prosecuting.
a war situation, people are
Yeah,
you're talking about life and death. Yeah.
exactly, and I think this is a situation where I think you got to be um, a little bit more respective to history and everyone's side. And I don't think I don't think that right now. I think we're prisoner of the moment. We understand that what happened on October 7th was a terrible situation, and now we're like anything that anybody states against what caused or led up to those moments, like you're not dealing with the fact that Hamas is a monster. It's just like, and if you're not stating that Hamas is a monster, then you are anti-Semitic, and it's just like this broad definition of anti-Semitism is just like now anti-Semitic. It's like defining what is a woman. It's just like what is anti-Semitism. It's just
Like if you don't like Netanyahu, then it's anti-Semitism.
right. It's just like, and I'm not for that. And I think Sam may be he's one of the people that's fighting like wokeism and all of that stuff. And I think like he may be slightly feeding into it, especially with this situation and counting himself as a Zionist and everything being deemed as anti-Semitism. Him being like sharply against the college protests. I'm like, dude, like I think you may have a bias alarm that needs to be rung, and so at least you can take a centered approach to understand the other side. And I don't think that's where I think Sam may be messing up. It's just like
Well, next time we speak, we should go ahead and let Sam talk on it. So, because I don't want to, I want to give him a chance to like say his perspective, because because there's a lot of stuff where like people were like, I think there is an element of the left that are just like pro people of color no matter what, right? And then like you're pro Hamas is like what were you talking about? Like,
never heard
that's
pro Hamas. So like
totally wrong.
I've never heard pro Hamas. Like and I follow politics a lot. Like I've never seen an interview where someone hasn't condemned Hamas or someone was
I'm talking
pro.
about like the college stuff, like the college protests
I know. I was just
that
like
are like I think some of them did celebrate that attack, and
I
it's like, yeah, you're
celebrating the
dead
attack
wrong for that.
is wrong. You're dead wrong. But I'm saying like I haven't seen anyone that is just like out there protesting in respect of being pro Hamas relative to being anti Israel. And I think those are two distinctly different positions.
They are different. They are
And
different.
I
You
think
could be against Hamas and Israel.
right. And I think
Yeah,
Sam is joining them. And I think that's where my issue is I think those are two distinctive different positions. And I haven't seen a pro Hamas position and I wouldn't be for it. And if anyone had a pro Hamas position, to me that's absolutely
but
wrong.
but here's what I'll say. Even though it's different, like being, um, pro Hamas isn't like for instance being against Israel doesn't mean you're pro Hamas. What I'll say is criticizing Israel is what Hamas wants you to do, right? Like it's in there, like they're trying to make Israel look as bad as possible. That's why they don't evacuate buildings. That's why they try to get their people killed. They want the death toll to be higher. That way, Israel looks worse, and they can start turning the world against Israel, turn public opinion, all of that. Like they're not going to take down Israel militarily, with brute force. But if they can drag Israel's reputation through the mud, and to me, like that's the bigger picture goal. And then the more we talk negatively about Israel, Hamas is winning when we do that. Now, I'm not saying that means they could be immune and they can't be criticized, but that's why me personally, I don't like talking about it because there's also like a natural two sides feeling that people have. Like whenever there's a conflict, oh, well, it's both sides, where it's like, yeah, but Israel and Hamas ain't a two side situation. I mean, there's one side that, principally based on largely religious beliefs, wants to completely eradicate the other, but can't. And then in another case, well, Israel could completely eradicate, Gaza, but they choose not to. But they may not be as humane in how they carry out the war as the world wants them to be. But it's not a two sides are equal situation here. And the more we just talk about how Israel isn't perfect in their response to the attack, it's almost like we're letting Hamas off the hook by holding Israel to a higher standard.
I understand. Like,
So
and
we need to keep criticizing Hamas as like the root of the problem. That's the root of the problem. Now, could Israel be doing better? Sure, but it's easy to say that from the sidelines.
and,
But Hamas is the problem, in my opinion, fundamentally.
and no, I agree with you. To me, Hamas is the issue fundamentally, but to me, I think what's happening is that if you're like to me, Sam isn't distinguishing the difference between pro-Palestinian and Hamas, and I know that those two
There's
are
overlap, but they're
yeah
not the
over
same. Yeah.
yeah there's certainly overlap because like they were a political entity that like held elected officials in Palestine, where Hamas was a big ideology that was shared amongst the people, but it's not the same. And it's just like, and we could actually, there are some college students that are actually out there that are in protest of like that are pro-Palestinian. And it's just like, to me, having a pro-Palestinian position isn't anti-Semitic, and it's being dangerously confused as that. And I think we're in dangerous waters when you're automatically stating that telling the truth, even though it's what the enemy would want, is a discouraged position. The truth shouldn't be discouraged regardless of
Well, I'm
who.
saying, but this is almost a similar conversation we just had where Sam's told the truth about black people being an advantage, but then you're like, who are you with? Like,
But
what kind of people also say that? And it's like the same thing. What kind of people are pro-Palestinian? I'm not saying you're wrong for it. I'm just saying this is like the opposite of what you were just at in the beginning, when it was black folks, not Jews.
right, but I'm providing the context there. Whereas, like to me, Sam isn't giving due diligence to context. To say like, with Israel, you've had settlement issues, you've had uh, controlling the borders, you've had excessive uh, excessive reactions to protests. So like you have situations, and now in the war setting where you're just disproportionately killing citizens relative to Hamas individuals. Like it's disproportionate, and so it's just like if you're gonna state your position, like I'm gonna state mine, and it's just like you said, hey, we haven't given Sam a fair chance yet as it relates to state his position and to get a full clarity on what that is, but at least to provide some context when you're doing it, so that your position isn't doesn't have the same equality as the people who would hold your position but have different intention.
Yeah, and like to me, it's almost like I didn't like talking about Biden's debate and like stepping down just because it's bad for Biden. Just the more we talk about it, the worse it is. The more we talk about stepping down, the more he's pressured to step down, the worse everyone's confidence is. He loses donor votes. It's like even by talking about it, we're making it worse.
Right.
And
Damn right.
by and similarly, and I'm not saying that it makes anyone wrong for criticizing Israel, but just know that that's exactly Hamas's goal for
You're
everybody
right.
around the world to criticize Israel. And
You're
I
right.
don't want to do their work for them. But does that mean that Israel should be freely immune and do whatever they want? No, right? So I'm not saying that we can't criticize them, but I'm just saying I can understand uh, not wanting to, unless it's because again, like it's not a both sides situation. I mean, there's some things on both sides, but both sides ain't equal. Is a big difference
I mean,
between Israel and at least Hamas. Now, in the Palestinians, like you said, there's a lot of innocent Palestinians.
right.
But I don't like the whole like for instance, if I walk up, punch you in the face, and then like the whole conversation after that is about how you ain't responding perfectly to me punching you in the face. It's like that's kind of unfair.
You're
you
right.
know.
Like to me, you're dealing with three entities in this complex issue where two are only being focused on, and one is just being just killed en masse, and nobody's talking about their position. And if you talk about that position, like it's like Palestinians, and this is where I think people aren't reasonably speaking about Palestinians are being killed by Hamas and they're being killed by Israel. So it's just like
Yeah, both.
it's just like they are between a rock and a hard place. And it's just like, and if you're stating that, hey, like your enemy is also killing these civilians in addition to you, it's just like, and then I can't state for means of optics that what you're doing is disproportionately affecting civilians, and it could even be considered war crimes if I can't state that, because what the other people are trying to do is doing the same thing, and it makes your position look bad. Like I'm in, I'm not able to state the truth, and I think that is like, I think more than not, it's it's a dangerous position because you're damn near giving them immunity.
Right.
Like
That's what I said. We can't give them immunity, but I also don't want to hold them to such a high stick because it's easy to sit on the sideline and tell somebody else how they need to respond to especially something as brutal as October 7th, right? Like,
right,
it's easy to be like, you should just kill fewer civilians and everything. And again, like, Israel could kill way more civilians if they wanted to. Like, if they really wanted to kill a bunch of civilians, they can kill way more. Like, Israel doesn't want to maximize civilian casualties. It's just hard not to. And again, maybe they could do a little better. I'm not saying that they're perfect or anything, but they certainly could be worse. They certainly could be worse. And I don't think they have the intention of hurting as many civilians as possible. I think that's just a challenge that is difficult to avoid, given that they still want to respond harshly, and they'd rather only kill people from Hamas, but given that they hide in public centers with a bunch of people and everything, is difficult to do that. So I say intentions do matter. That doesn't mean that, they can't be criticized or that they're doing perfectly, but Israel is not like sitting around trying to, kill as many civilians as possible.
I don't think they're trying to do that, but I do think that they have a numbness to the result of civilian casualties, and I think it's due to polarization within their political structure right now, especially where you have a very far right leaning government, and I think that they're just they're more likely to dehumanize individuals, and I think that is a dangerous spot, and I think that's why I think it's reasonable to step up, because like you have to. We are humans. It's just like regardless of not, and I don't think that people are like I'm with eliminating Hamas, the destruction of Hamas. I
And
think
Hamas wants to eliminate us. We're not. I mean, we're apostates.
right,
So we know the punishment.
absolutely, absolutely.
Not apostates. We're infidels. Sorry, that's the wrong word. We're infidels. So it ain't good if you're an extremist Muslim when we're the infidel. I mean, we're basically not human either. I mean, we're human, but the goal is to either kill us or subjugate us and force the religion upon us.
But
So
by any means,
yeah.
like victory by any means is certainly going to be a moral loss, and I think like war, you're already doing a very difficult dance with morality when you're talking about war. But victory by any means is something that I'm just not, I can't be with. And I think condemnation of that is reasonable, especially when an entity is doing a disproportional damage. And just like, even though they could be doing more, I think they've already done enough. It's just like,
Well, war doesn't. Well, it depends on the goal, right? Done enough. Like proportionality is not like, for instance, if you punch me in the face, that don't mean I only get to punch you in the face back, right?
no,
Like if you punch me in the face, you
I,
done opened
I,
yourself up
right, yeah,
to a lot of problems coming your way, and it
right.
ain't gonna be proportional. If I have any power to make it disproportional, it's gonna be disproportional against your favor. But the question is like, what's the goal? Well, like, what are you going? What are you trying to accomplish? And at the end of the day, the goal should be peace. That's the long term goal. Is I don't want to just like punch you disproportionately, and then you punch me disproportionately, and we just keep doing that. Like I want to get to a point where we can just end this fight and be done with it. But that's hard, and to me, so it's not just like, okay, we're going to kill enough of you until we felt we've killed enough. It's like, well, okay, we can kill a bunch of people, but what problem did that solve? Right.
Yep.
And it didn't really solve nothing. Right. So to me, it's not like a proportionality question. It's a what is the goal and how are we going to accomplish it question.
But that's also one of my criticisms, and I think that is like Israel as it relates to their government, or maybe even not even the government, just Netanyahu in particular, because the government has been coming against that, is that they don't have any defined goal. And as of the moment, it is just killing people until we feel like the threat has been neutralized without any definitive goals. And their top military officials are like, we don't have goals set. We need clear political solutions to this. Like, the solution to this isn't military, it's a political solution, and we don't have definitive goals. And
I mean, I don't know if we know what the solution is. Period. Like,
I
I don't think we know that the political solution will work. I don't think we know if a military solution will work. So like, anybody that thinks they have a solution, I'm skeptical.
I think there's, I mean, I do have a hypothetical solution that I think will work that would involve international effort. And I think the same thing, and I think there's historical context to say that something like that, like a military occupation by a reasonable entity could work because it did with Afghanistan. And as soon as America pulled out, you see what happened. Just like 4,000 troops in one region was keeping stability. I think if you have a international military presence that is there to stabilize the region and is there until it can stabilize itself, or that there's systems in place that won't fall, then that could be a situation forward where now you have, and now it's not only on one party, it's not only on Israel because they're neighbors. It's an international effort to say, hey, this war is affecting the world. We want to get this resolved as soon as possible. We know that it's going to take a third party negotiator or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a political and military kind of,
Permanent occupation,
yeah, permanent.
basically.
They call it a permanent occupation, but it's not. But we're going to have people here to stabilize the region. We're not going to allow Hamas to grow, just like we did with ISIS. And I think you will have a stabilized region, just like Afghanistan was. Women were going to school. They were out, like they were having more access to the civil liberties, and like you had a region that was relatively stable. And then as soon as that military occupation was gone, it went into chaos. It's just like you're going to have a military occupation there until you can have a reasonable effect, which may even take a generation. You may have to be there
You got
for,
to change the whole culture from the youth level up.
right. Like you may have to be, and that's where I think people don't want to talk about those uncomfortable situations to where like this may be a military occupation that lasts 50, 60 years until you all are stable. And that's the solution. That's a long-term solution, but
But
people
to be
want,
international, not just on Israel.
right. And to me, I think that's a reasonable. To me, I think that's a reasonable path forward because like they do that with countries in Africa as it relates to like ports that are extremely important. There are countries that have, like, I believe there's what, forget what the country is. It may be Djibouti. I could be wrong or something like that, but it's literally. But they have like a Chinese military base, a United States military base, like a France a military base, and they all are there because of the international importance of the ports there. And it's just like this is important to the international community. Y'all can't have no corruption. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a military presence here, and it's going to stabilize the region. And it did. It stabilized the ports, and that's what you could have in Palestine. But I think it's uncomfortable for people to talk about long periods of military occupation, and people generally don't like the the sound of that because it's just like people generally want to get out of war and they want peace. But I think the only way to do that is some sort of long term military political solution. And that would be my solution. To me, that I think that is reasonable. That personally,
I'm not informed enough on like the details of the region and how feasible like getting international buy-in for something like that would be. But I see what you're saying though about how we were able to affect change in Afghanistan with the military presence that kept the extremists out and locked down, and try to do that long enough that the culture shifts. Um, It seems feasible. Like I said, I don't know enough really, but I can understand. I can understand that working if we can get the international buy-in. Because I agree. As soon as you leave, like they're going to probably start back up.
It's gone.
So like either Israel's going to permanently occupy them, or not going to get permanently occupied. They're just going to hit you again next week.
Right. And there's no way. To me, there's no win if Israel permanently occupies him. Like there's no win there. I think you may have a bigger regional conflict if you talk about a permanent Israeli occupation. It's just like now you're going to have a response from Iran potentially. You're going to have a response potentially from Saudi Arabia, where they're just like, we're not for that. And it's just like, well, if you're not for it, how about Saudi Arabia? How about the U.S.? How about Israel? How about we build up the military? How about we support the pro-Palestinian uh, cause, and whoever those people are, we prop them up. We get an international effort going. People who have some sort of uh, say in that region, because like you're going to want Hezbollah,
Yes,
Iran.
westernization of the culture.
Absolutely. I think that's how you do it. Now you can say that failed when we tried to do it in Afghanistan, but I think
It
it
wasn't permanent, is what you're
right,
saying. It wasn't that long.
right. We always had the intention of getting out. If you let them know we ain't going nowhere, that is either it's a fight, like that's a real war that will eventually either come to an end, or now you're preparing them for like this is your new normal, and now people have to live with that, and ultimately once they start to live with that, I think just like uh, people who are Muslim in Israel, when you poll them and you ask if they would prefer to be in like Gaza or something like that, they're like, no, I like Israel. I think like I like my laws here. I think I can be a reasonable Muslim here, and even though it's a Jewish state, like I still could be here. I think eventually you could have a culture shift that's big enough, but it has to be permanent. When you have to let people know we ain't going nowhere. This is your new norm until y'all get it right.
That's an interesting perspective. If you could pull it off, get the international buy-in. Hopefully, it doesn't just become a war
Right.
with other Muslim nations in the region. But yeah, if you could just say, look, no extremism, none of that. We just gonna live normal and have law and order, and no one attacks anybody. And you start getting these bombs, we gonna raid you and get rid of them, and just stay on top of it, keep the peace.
I, like and to me, and like when I think like when you say it seemed relatively simple. Like it worked. Like you know what I mean? Like it honestly worked. It worked. It worked in Afghanistan. And the moment we left, they took city by city. It's just like what was stopping them before? A military occupation. And it's just like there's precedence there. It worked. And to me it seems relatively easy. It's just like now you have a system in place to where you can constantly combat that, and it's not a war. Now it's just everyday life. It's just like it's against the law to want to have terrorist organizations or to plot against this. Like now you actually have law and order. Unfortunately, I don't hate that term. I don't necessarily hate the term, but I hate the historical context behind the term. But you have law and order. It's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it might be dangerous to occupy. I don't want to occupy it. I
I
don't know.
wouldn't either. God damn it.
Walking around neighborhoods over there and trying to enforce the law. That's, at least in the beginning, that might be a little tough. But I see what you're saying in the long run, though.
And the first people to do it should be Palestinians. I mean, you would to me the first route would be to prop them up and to provide as many military aid as you can to the Palestinians. Like to me, Israel should be providing it should be providing Palestinians with weapons to defeat Hamas. Like to me, Israel shouldn't even really be fighting Hamas. Like Hamas is holding Palestinians hostage, and
Well,
Palestinians.
I would assume that, though, because a lot of them are
Right. I
saying,
mean, like, I'm saying in the in what should be the ideal situation, Palestinians should be wanting to fight against Hamas, because and now they're saying it. Like now, I believe if you poll Palestinians, they've said it. They feel like Hamas is a huge negative to their future, and they would prefer if Hamas was gone. Most Palestinians poll in that direction now. So it's just like and I've seen polls as it relates to that. And I think that's what you should do. Like, if you have that, make them the enemy to Palestinians. Make that the media, the media consumption. Like, make them the, because Hamas is the true enemy. It's not Palestinians, and it should be the enemy for Palestinians, and it should be the enemy for the world. And it's just like, if you make them the enemy and you actually prop up pro-Palestinians, then you're going to make
Palestinian groups you can trust, make them the military, and so that they pay the price of enforcing their own stuff, and we just get played back up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, y'all go on and fight the war, and just like we're doing with Ukraine, we're gonna make sure that you got more than everything that you need. And even
Well, but
if
here's the difference though. We left the Afghan army with resources.
we
They
did,
didn't use them. They just like, we ain't about to fight. I ain't about to die. Fight Taliban.
you
You
damn
know. But it's all right. Now the Ukrainians were ready to fight. They're like, no,
right.
we
About
ain't.
right.
We ain't about to get. So the question is, would Palestinians fight or not? My guess is they wouldn't, but I could be wrong. I don't know them that well. But regardless, that doesn't change the validity of what you said, right? It's just a matter of who does the enforcement.
Right.
As long as the enforcement gets done and you just don't let them, have the bombs, or you confiscated all the advanced military stuff and you just keep it locked down so they can't do it. Well, then you got, they just got peace. It's not
Until
the best peace, but it'd be an effective peace, hopefully.
yep, until culture changes, until you have a significant, because like people don't understand the war is more so than anything. It's cultural. It's a cultural war. It's a cultural shift in ideology that needs to happen in that whole region, honestly. But that's what would have to happen. It's just like you would have to create peace so people understand what a quality of living is relative to their positions. And then at that point, once you have that cultural shift, now you don't have to fight those ideologies anymore, because what you're fighting now is an ideology. You're like,
Right. Not people. It's once the ideology is gone, then people aren't really that dangerous.
right. And that's another thing. That's something that you point out in your book.
Yeah, Good Faith Politics should be coming out in a couple of months. So yeah, hopefully some folks get some value from that.
Absolutely. Separating ideas from people and realizing that like ideas are things that can be shifted, and we don't want to put any onus or blame on individuals. It's just like, if they're just a biological representation of an idea, and an idea is something that can be changed. It's just like, we don't want to be attached to those ideas. It's just like, we want the best, and we don't want to affect the people for those ideas. We just want to change the ideas.
Right. Yeah, man. Well, good conversation. We'll pick up next time. Maybe let Sam put his case forward and examine it more specifically based on the things he says.
I think that's reasonable.
All right. All right, man. Good conversation.